Welcome to the Rob Call Bottom Up Show, or I should say, welcome back to the Bottom Up Show. My guest for this show, in the second half of this show, is Regina Nelson. She's the author of Theorists at Large, One Woman's Ambiguous Journey into Medical Cannabis, and she's the author of The Survivor's Guide to Medical Cannabis and co-author of Time for the Talk Today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we originally planned to have this on 420 Day yesterday, but there were some tech problems, so we're doing it the day after. But still, I haven't really done an interview about marijuana before, and so there's lots to talk about. And I understand you just went to a conference in Pittsburgh where you gave some presentations about marijuana. What did you talk about?
What I did was I taught some CME, or continuing medical education accredited classes, that I'm teaching as a part of our Plant a Seed for Cannabis education tour nationwide. So it's the first time that someone has accredited through the American Academy of Family Physicians continuing medical education credits around the endocannabinoid system and the use of cannabis and hemp medicinally.
First time, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. We're really proud of that.
I've been involved in some fields that are emerging, and one of the big steps towards becoming a more accepted field is to get continuing education credits for teaching in that field. Another is to have a department in a university that covers that field. Are you teaching anything at a university?
Not yet. There are people who are beginning to do that. We're starting to see information on the endocannabinoid system, of course, the botany around the plant. It's definitely creeping in. And I'm in Boulder, Colorado. CU Boulder is looking at cannabis from a number of different angles across their campus. So we are starting to see more and more education. And we're going to continue to do this. I mean, it's been 30 years since we've discovered the endocannabinoid system. And that's kind of what we celebrated yesterday on 420. But still, very few people know that every human being has one.
So we'll talk about the endocannabinoid system in a moment, but I have to observe that when I do video interviews, and this is also a video interview if you're listening to it on the radio, there's always something in the background. I mean, some people have bookshelves or a painting. You have bongs in your background. I have to say that's a first.
Well, that's good, and that's our famous glass collection, kind of keeping it from being broke. It's stored in the office, but yeah, it can get your attention there. There are 4 of us that share a home here together that are all patients and have been cannabis users for some time. So, and I think that large one back there is a gift I got, my first speaker's gift, which came from the Cannabis Film Festival, which my publishing partner, Michael E. Browning, put on in 2016.
Oh, cool. So, and again, you're in Colorado where it is totally legal to have marijuana for recreational or medical purposes.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing that we've seen through that is once the recreational market began, we saw a greater influx of medical patients. Suddenly people, and mostly seniors, people who knew this was an illegal drug, well, suddenly it wasn't seen as an illegal drug and they had an opportunity to try it. And then they were willing to go through that medical cannabis patient process so that they could get access to more products, for better pricing.
And currently there are a couple of states where it's legal recreationally, but a lot more states where it's legal medicinally, right?
Yes, about 30 states it's legal medicinally, and there are a number of other states that have CBD only programs. And there's a handful of states, Colorado, Washington, Oregon, California. They're growing where we're seeing adult use also being decriminalized. But let's make sure we say decriminalized. Nothing's actually been legalized here.
What's the difference between decriminalized and legalized?
Decriminalized means that they've removed some penalties and made it where adults who possess maybe up to an ounce of cannabis are not, it's no offense. But if you have slightly more than that, it's still an offense. If you're growing your own in some states, it's still an offense. So as long as people are still going to jail for this particular plant, nothing's been legalized. It's just been that it's gained some decriminalization.
Got it. And you said what
CBD or
CBD?
cannabidiol. Mhm.
Cannabidiol.
Cannabidiol.
Cannabidiol. Now, explain what that is.
It is just another cannabinoid from the cannabis plant. We know about THC because it's been studied since the 1960s. We know that's the piece that has the most euphoric side effects. We've had a lot of talk in the media and mainstream about cannabidiol or CBD in the last few years because Dr. Sanjay Gupta kind of revealed in 2013 through a special he did how it was helping a particular little girl who had a seizure disorder. But we're now seeing many states authorizing, and now that hemp is under the U.S. Farm Bill, we're seeing people utilize hemp oil products for a wide variety of from things from aches and pains to some more serious medical conditions.
And CBD is the only kind of marijuana derivative that's available in a couple states, including my state, I believe, Pennsylvania. Is that correct?
That may be true. I know it's like in Georgia, Oklahoma, and some states like this that only CBD is currently decriminalized.
Okay. So it looks like Michael has joined us. I'm going to unmute him. Michael, can you hear me? Can we hear you? Okay, great. I didn't want you to pop in, but Michael Edward Browning is the co-author of the book with Regina and PhD at the time of the talk today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So there's so much to talk about marijuana. I mean, when I think about marijuana and it being illegal, I think
I think it's Rob hung up.
Can you hear me?
Not us.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it looked like it was hanging up there. It looks like your video was hanging up there a little bit, Rob.
Okay. Well, I'm back. So,
it's giving us a notice that your network bandwidth is low there.
Okay. Well, let's not talk about it. Keep talking as long as you can hear me. Okay.
Okay.
And I'll all of this out of the radio part. So when I think about marijuana and its legality, I think that is basically legal because that's good for drug companies and alcohol companies, private prison companies, and people who want to keep people from voting who would vote against them. And that I did a search, and that's about 5 million people. 5 million people nationwide would be enough to change just about any election. Of course, and we're in the middle of a very significant transitional period, I think. So talk a little bit about the politics of it from your perspective, being in a state where it's become decriminalized.
All right, sure. And may I ask what state you're calling from, Rob?
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania. Okay, great. And the doctor did just do a fantastic conference there at the World Medical Cannabis Conference. We were discussing this yesterday, and it seems like even Republicans like Alexander Cuomo of New York, former House Speaker Boehner, our own governor here, Cory Gardner, is a Republican that just, I guess, negotiated a deal with our Republican president as far as keeping our cannabis laws intact here. And I'm sure that goes as well for Washington, Oregon, California, maybe California. They're still a little touchy over there, but I do believe that we're going to see deschedulization happening, and that's what we're really focused on, is to have the plant descheduled from the Controlled Substances Act so that research and like you were talking about those studies, those university studies, those are what have been hampered by this Schedule I status.
Right, and basically, it's illegal right now to even do research on marijuana because it's Schedule I. And it just came out in the last day or two that Chuck Schumer is now supporting descheduling it and keeping it at a local level, how states handle it.
Yes, that was a very happy 420 present for the entire nation.
Oh, do you think he did it as a 420 present? I mean, it did come out.
I'm sure he timed it that way.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they planned that. But the thing is, it is time for that. But it's also time for the people like that are now getting behind this to see the social harm it's done over the decades and start beginning to undo and look at that as well. Cannabis is non-toxic. You can't have a fatal overdose from it. It is it's a plant, and a lot of people have been very harmed over, the laws and regulations around this, and we still struggle with it in this state. We've had caregivers, facing criminal charges and now on probation for doing nothing more than what they thought was within the law of Colorado, and that's happened across the state. Again, we have to very clearly talk about what's decriminalized and what's legalization, because we haven't legalized anything. We're starting to decriminalize it, and I think we do need to leave it to the states. But it's a very different access, depending on your zip code, even within the state of Colorado. If you live in a very rural area and a county that's not accepted medical cannabis and has chosen not to participate in the recreational cannabis, you may have to drive a very long way to even have safe legal access.
Interesting. So it's just like there are blue laws in certain states where people can't buy alcohol on certain days, for example.
Well, and we're undoing this like this is an issue of prohibition like alcohol, and not like this is a public health issue that impacts all of us. Again, whether you use cannabis or not, you have an endocannabinoid system. I'm really excited that descheduling would open up, I think, a lot around education and around research, because there are a lot of hospitals that would like to get behind this, but for their fear of losing their federal funding. And, same true with many research groups. So there's a lot changing and a lot going on. I think that we'll see a lot of shift in the next few years.
Cool. That's a good thing.
It's a very good thing.
Yeah. For a lot of reasons. I mean, it'll take away the ability to arrest people and put them in jail for having a joint or for using marijuana. And it'll help give access to it for people who have medical problems. Now, this is where you're an expert, where you're teaching people, for those who are coming in late, you've been giving medical continuing education training to doctors.
Yes.
So what do you teach them? What are some of the common misunderstandings that doctors have, and what do you need to get across to them as like core elements? When you get approved for medical continuing education, you have to describe specific goals and understandings that you're going to produce within the people you're training. What are those goals that you're looking to do?
Yeah, we talk to them about understanding. I think the biggest thing with physicians is they don't know anything about this unless they've been self-taught. Those who are working now with evaluation centers or have opened cannabis specialty practice, they've been mostly self-taught, and many of them are out educating others. But for those who are not, they've not been exposed to this, neither in medical school, nor are they required in many places to have continuing medical education credits. We're now changing those regulations and pushing for all physicians to have at least 4 by 2025. So they have a basis of understanding, because their biggest thing is, I don't know how people use it. I don't know how much they should have. So what we do is we talk about the many ways you can use cannabis, because they all talk about smoking and that that is good for acute relief. If you have a base of cannabis through edibles or through using oils and other things, this gives you a great place to work from. And that's where we see people starting to be able to wean from pharmaceuticals or painkillers and things like this, is when they are able to titrate a good dose through the use of tinctures, capsules, edibles, these type, that type foundation, and then they can use smoking or vaporizing for acute relief. And I give them a target to titrate to. They start with only, very small doses, and they have a target based on their weight. So they have an idea. And it's usually about the time that people hit that target that they find that they're able, they really got this. And then they get empowered with it so they can use more or less depending on what their particular medical needs are. People have good days and bad days. And, I'm a fibromyalgia patient, and that's certainly true for me. We're having a storm here. I've just completed a road trip. I'm consuming more today than I have in a while. And I definitely feel better for that, but I'm able to function. Whereas if I had taken painkillers this morning, I would not be functioning very well right now.
So did you smoke or did you use CBD oil?
Both. I use a THC rich oil. I'm not a very big person. I've had a lot of health issues, so I take quite a lot. I could probably knock you out for a couple of days with my regular daily dose. But I also function really well, and I don't typically get high. I kind of had to trade that off for pain relief and other things. Too many people titrate to the high, and once you start consuming edibles and other things, the high it doesn't impact you as much. You're able to function through it better. But, being a consistent consumer for the last 5 years because of some significant health issues, I really don't have any euphoric side effects. I have a lot of medical benefits of side effects. I still relax, feel better, my pain levels drop. And I use cannabis in a number of ways every day, both orally, like we've just discussed. I smoke and vape, and I also use topicals.
You use what? Topicals, really?
Yeah, this is the first thing that I turn people on to when they come to this, because there's no head high. So it's just a body effect. And for people who have arthritis issues, it can be just game changing in your life. But for people even with autism, we see that kind of help. And there's been a very good research study that's looked at withdrawal from opiates. And just with the use of cannabis-infused topicals, they were able to lower withdrawal symptoms 50 to 75% in a lot of patients. So I talk to people about the topical use a lot of times because it's a really good way for people to, again, begin this therapy.
Interesting. So you've got this book on to talk today aimed at doctors. What's the goal of that book?
The goal of the book was really to talk to doctors and patients about having a conversation around this. It actually started in 2015 when I went to Illinois, which was a new market, to do some consulting work. And I trained some volunteers to start working for my nonprofit, because Illinois was the first state that wouldn't allow cannabis evaluation centers where you can step outside your normal healthcare practice and you can pay a doctor to look at your medical records and determine whether you qualify in that state. So you had to go to your personal physician. And many people were very scared of that conversation. So I put a little booklet together to kind of give them that platform. And when I met and started working with Michael in 2016, he really helped me expand upon that following my dissertation work, because I talked with both doctors and patients about that process. And we were able to put a lot of little tips and tricks in for both of them with his help.
So what are some tips for patients and what are some tips for doctors?
Michael, you want to take that one?
Well, sure. Thanks for asking, Rob. What we have as our basis is having people come to the timeforthetalk.today website, and whether they're a patient or a practitioner, there's that chapter of the book specifically written towards them that they can download for free. So again, that website is Time for the Talk, the name of the book, .today rather than .com, because we're emphasizing the urgency that everybody should be having this talk with their doctor. And we're really not in it for the money. So it's not a .com, it's about the urgency of having this conversation. So yeah, in the patient section, we have a very good little 5-point setup. Before you go and talk to your doctor, we would suggest just these 5 points are that you would prepare yourself by ordering and reviewing your own medical records. A lot of people don't ever look at their own patient records, but they have every right to them. And it can be very illuminating for people to look at their own patient records. So we have you order and review those. Determine if you have a qualifying condition in your state. So in your state, you may qualify for PTSD, The state may only qualify patients for cancerous tumors or irretractable pain. So depending on what your state allows.
I think that's what it is in Pennsylvania where I am. It's a pretty tight list of reasons.
Right. And depending on the state, like in Illinois, you have to have a bona fide, what they call a bona fide doctor-patient relationship. So you have to be seeing this physician prior and have established a history with them in order for your medical recommendation to be valid. So states are kind of all in a mess because there is no federal descheduling of the drug that allows the overarching policy to be applied. So,
and I know in Pennsylvania, you have to go to a special doctor. You can't go to your regular doctor, I believe.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so
there's
those differences.
Right. So the third thing on this little 5-point list would be to make a list of your qualifying conditions and then document your systems for this conversation you're going to have. Bring along some educational and moral support. This book is an excellent educational support, and that's what the guide is meant for, is to go in and facilitate this conversation with your doctor. And if they have no idea of the endocannabinoid system, even though it was discovered 30 years ago. This is 1988 it was discovered, and here we are in 2018, and we still are hamstrung for any sort of research domestically. And yeah, doctors just don't know about it. So the final thing is just to be prepared to take notes and go into this conversation with that 5-point plan and prepare yourself, because it still is very contentious conversation. You can imagine going in and speaking with your physician, Rob, about this and what sort of internal conflicts that can bring up on both sides of the conversation.
My physician would be fine. He's a guy who has actually volunteered in Dharamsala with the Dalai Lama. He's a pretty flexible guy. But I can see where that could really make some patients really anxious, especially if they're taking addictive medications now and they're looking for an alternative. They may be afraid to ask their doctor, and I'm sure that's an issue too.
Well, I think this is a big issue because of this. I mean, even our president has acknowledged we have a major opioid addiction issue in the United States of America, and a lot of it is coming from prescribed opiates. And these pain clinics in many states deny patients access to their pain medicine if they test positive for THC. This can be true at pain clinics in Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and California, as well as other medicalized states. So this is pretty blanket. I was really pleased when I came to work with a pain management clinic in Illinois that came to realize that their patients, so many of them tested positive anyway, that they needed to be able to help manage their opiates. And what they saw consistently was that people lowered their opiate dose with the support around being in that medical cannabis program. And again, getting to a therapeutic dose of the cannabis along with being able to lower the dose of opioids. And that happens very naturally with people who are exposed to right dosing and are empowered by their physicians. And I think if we want to change this opioid epidemic, we need to really seriously look at cannabis as a potential solution. Dr. Oz, Dr. Gupta, many others are beginning to say this. From what I've seen, working with thousands of patients, I can say that 100% of the time, people lower their opiate dose. Often, they get them out of their lives completely. But the fact that 100% can lower their dose, and we've got plenty of studies that show cannabis helps opioids work more effectively, so you need less. We need to make a change here, and this is an urgent issue.
So it could really save lives. I have kids in their 20s and 30s, and they've lost multiple friends who have
I
died.
have too.
Yeah.
We just lost Tom Petty, and I use that as an example because we were about the same age.
And Prince.
56. That's only 12 years for me, and I think what a shame. But He died, he had a broken hip. He was in pain. And he overdosed on opioids because his pain wasn't being managed appropriately. And he was blamed for his own death. He took too many. That's what happened. He was in pain. If his pain had been managed better and he had been on a cannabis oil with fewer opiates instead of just being given a prescription of opiates to take, he might still be alive.
Right.
You know, and we have a lot of those, you know, those issues that are out there. We're seeing more celebrities in this issue, but this happens every day to average Americans.
Absolutely. So I have a couple questions. We don't have that much time. I want to hit on a couple things. One thing, you mentioned titrating the high. Titration usually means adjusting dose to optimize it, but I've never heard it used to titrate a high.
Well, what you're doing is you're doing it to maximize your dose. You need to get to a therapeutic dose, but you can't get there fast because you're going to get too high. This is what animal studies show us. They give us parameters for pain control and cancer control, but they always say, but if you start there, they can't function. Well, we know people can function on low doses. So we have to titrate very slowly so that they can get used to the euphoria, and then increase their dose, get used to the euphoria, increase their dose, get used to the euphoria. But if they once they hit that therapeutic dose and they hang there, the euphoria is no longer an issue. They've built a tolerance. They don't, you know, so they no longer are, again, wanting to use it. Well, and I say this, using cannabis because they're looking for a high. They're using cannabis because they have some symptoms that have returned. And I give you this example. On days that I have more nausea than others, you know, that's that trigger for me to increase my dose of cannabis. I can increase my dose fairly significantly and still not get high, but my symptoms go down. And my nausea becomes more easy to deal with. My pain levels drop. And so I'm no longer titrating to the high, I'm titrating to pain relief. And because the high is such a barrier to that in the beginning, particularly if you smoke, because if you smoke, you're going to get higher than if you use a tincture or if you eat an edible or take a capsule. So I try to get people to start with a base. And then if they want to smoke on top of that, it's great for acute relief. A lot of times I stick with my base, but because I'm having nausea, I'll just smoke a quick bowl full of cannabis and my nausea will drop and I don't need to take additional oil at that point. Now I've got my problem under control.
Okay. Now another thing is the endocannabinoid system. You mentioned that, and that's part of what you taught at your continuing medical education presentation. So tell us about what it is and what it means for people.
Well, the endocannabinoid system is a receptor system throughout the body. And the CB1 receptor system part of it is tied with your central nervous system, your brain and spinal cord, pain relief. Your CB3 receptor system is tied with your gut and your immune system, things like your spleen, your liver, your filtering. But both have effect in, again, pain and immunity. And so you build receptors throughout your body at different times. Illness and injury are imbalances in the body, and the endocannabinoid's sole purpose is to bring balance to the body. It's not just an endocrine system like we were thinking a few years ago. In the last year, it's been shown that it's probably our primary endocrine system over things like our adrenal, our pituitaries, our thyroid.
Wait, you're saying that the endocannabinoid system is more important than the endocrine system?
It is over all of those endocrine systems.
Over? And what do you mean by over?
It has effect, meaning it has effect in your making dopamine and serotonin. It has effect in your pituitary function. And I give this example because I'm still asking scientists, because we still don't know from a scientific standpoint why this has happened. But I have a little girl who had MRIs for 2 years that showed she had no pituitary gland. She has a malformed brain. She had no pituitary function. After 10 months of cannabis therapy, with none of her other pharmaceutical meds changing, she regenerated and has a pituitary gland. Why? How? If only one thing's changed. We know cannabis works in these receptor systems at a cellular level and that it has retrograde signaling. It sends transport messages throughout the body, but we don't have enough evidence to understand why a little girl has regenerated a pituitary gland. We need more research. We need more funding, because there are so many questions that are that important that we need to answer, that we're so far ahead with observational evidence than scientific, because we've had people in states like Colorado using cannabis consistently for many years, and we have medical evidence of their outcomes, but we're not able to get to large cohort studies.
And for that, we need to deschedule marijuana at a federal level to allow researchers to study it.
Yes.
We're pretty much just out of time. You want to give a website again,
Michael?
Sure, it's time for the talk.today. So the title of the book, .today. And just one little more quick thing to bring this home for people. 2 nuggets about the endocannabinoid system is that every human has one. And one way to look at what the doctor was just trying to describe to you is if the endocannabinoid system is the phone line between the other departments. So your pituitary gland is a department, your regulatory system is a department, your digestive system is a department, and the endocannabinoid system is the phone lines between them that's delivering the messages of what they need to do to create homeostasis in the body.
All right. And thank you. My guests for this show have been Regina Nelson, PhD, who co-authored with Michael Edward Browning the book Time for the Talk, which you can get and download as part of from timeforthetalk.today. And you've been listening to the Rob Call Bottom Up Show, available on iTunes and Stitcher and Pacifica Radio Network and Progressive Radio Network. And thumbs up, yes. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.